Husband accused me of baby trapping him. Now he's spiraling, and I've made a choice that will change everything. My husband, M35, and I, F32, have been married for 7 years. He lived next door, and we just clicked. It was like a fairy tale. One thing I've always thought made our marriage so strong was our friendship and trust in each other, although now my husband seems to think otherwise. Recently, my husband found out that his friend Jeff, M34, believes he was baby trapped. Jeff's wife, F32, stopped taking the pill and became pregnant a few months into their relationship, but only told him after they got married. Jeff comes from a very conservative family, which his wife knew, and he felt obligated to marry her after the pregnancy. Now, he feels stuck in the marriage because of the vow he made, despite the unhealthy dynamic. For some reason, my husband has been really shaken by this. I'm currently 4 months pregnant with our first child, and yesterday he asked me if I had baby trapped him. At first I laughed because I genuinely thought he was joking, but he was dead serious. He doubled down, so I told him we've already been married for 7 years, and having a baby isn't exactly a way to trap him further. He didn't like my answer and said there's no time limit on baby trapping. He claimed my intentions weren't pure because I acted like his concerns were a joke. He said he used to trust me, but my reaction gave him no reason to trust me now. I had no idea what he wanted from me or how I was supposed to respond, so I suggested we talk about it in the morning. But when I woke up, my husband was gone. Instead, I received a nasty text from his brother, M28, accusing me of forcing my husband into this pregnancy, even though it was a joint decision. Now my husband isn't answering any of my calls or texts. I'm completely at a loss and have no idea how to move forward. Any advice would mean the world right now. Update 1 day later. It took me a while, but reading through the comments made me realize something important. I was not angry enough. My husband's accusations were not just confusing and upsetting, they were deeply insulting to me and to our marriage. I think I was so shocked that it did not register at first, but once it sank in, the anger hit me. I called my best friend, who is 31 years old and who has always been my rock. She came over with chocolate and, honestly, more fury than I had at that point. After I got everything off my chest, she called her husband, who is 34 years old and happens to be a family lawyer. He came over too, and after hearing the full story, he offered to represent me if I decided to go through with a divorce. He is genuinely one of the kindest people I know and said he would draft the papers on Monday. Not long after, my mother-in-law, who is 66 years old, showed up with my husband in tow. Apparently, he had gone to her house late the night before, insisting I was trapping him with the baby. Thankfully, my mother-in-law is no nonsense and immediately tore into him before bringing him back to our house to apologize. When he finally faced me, my husband would not even look me in the eye. He mumbled that he is scared about becoming a dad and took those fears out on me. He admitted he was not sure he was ready for the responsibility, but then had the nerve to act like he was stepping up by apologizing, as if that is some heroic act. Eye roll. I told him flat out that he is a coward and that he should stay with his parents until I am ready to talk. I did not mention the divorce papers because I was not sure how he would react, but he will find out soon enough. I also showed my mother-in-law the nasty text I got from my brother-in-law. The look on her face was thunderous, and I have no doubt she will handle that situation, but I do not know how yet. Right now, I am completely drained. My best friend has offered to stay the night, and we are planning to watch silly movies to take my mind off everything. I have also made an appointment with a therapist for next week. For now, I just need to rest and process. It is heartbreaking that my marriage has come to this, but I am trying to take it one step at a time. Second update 9 days later. Overall, everything has settled a little bit. In good news, I had a scan with the doctor, my mother-in-law attended with me, and the baby is happy and healthy. I finally found out the gender. I am having a little girl. I am absolutely over the moon. My mother-in-law was so touched that I included her in the scan, and she is incredibly excited to become a grandmother. On that note, my mother-in-law organized a family lunch a couple of days after the scan. I was a little hesitant, but I knew she had good intentions and would not do anything to make matters worse. When I arrived, my husband, my brother-in-law, my father-in-law, who is 70 years old, and my mother-in-law were all there. It was awkward at first until my mother-in-law asked if anyone had something to say. My brother-in-law spoke first and apologized for his awful text message, explaining that he got swept up in the moment and wanted to support his brother. I told him how hurtful it had been to receive such a vindictive message, especially when he knew that my husband and I had been trying for almost a year. He hung his head and mumbled something, and that was pretty much the last I heard from him for the rest of the afternoon. Next, my mother-in-law gave my husband a pointed look, but he actively avoided everyone's eyes. Eventually, she announced that my husband would no longer be welcome to stay in her house. She said she was ashamed of his behavior and would prefer to make space for her granddaughter rather than have some lowlife hanging around. My husband looked ready to protest, but stopped when he heard the word granddaughter. His face lit up and he started crying, saying how thrilled he was to learn the baby is a girl. Suddenly, my husband wanted to touch my belly and asked if he could come home and help paint the nursery. I told him in no uncertain terms that he was not welcome and that he had destroyed any trust I had in him. I explained that if I took him back, I would always worry he would disappear when faced with big news, and that I could not have someone at my side who balked at the first challenge. He asked if I was telling him it was over, and I told him point blank that I had hired a lawyer. My husband became frantic, but I felt oddly calm, almost detached, like a weight had been lifted. Normally, I am a big crier, but in that moment, I felt removed from it all. My husband said it was not fair, that he had just panicked a little, and now I was throwing away our life and keeping him from his daughter. My father-in-law reminded him that this was the same baby he claimed to feel trapped by just 2 weeks ago. My husband insisted it was a mistake and that he was just stressed, but my mother-in-law asked how he thought I felt. She told him to imagine being vulnerable, giving up your body to grow a family, only to have the one person you trust accuse you of something terrible. He repeated that it was a mistake and that he had projected his fears onto me. I told my husband that his actions broke me. I had dreams of a beautiful family, and he shattered them in an instant. My husband said he wanted those same things and our baby girl, but he let panic overwhelm him. I told him that was not an excuse for what he put me through, and that it did not seem like panic when his mother had to drag him to my door to apologize. He had no real answer, except to say he was ready now and wanted to be there for our daughter. Through all of this, despite everything he said about wanting me and our baby, he never once apologized properly. After a long, tense discussion, the lunch finally wrapped up, and my mother-in-law stood by her decision that my husband would not be welcome to stay with her anymore. He asked again if he could come home with me, but I told him that it was my house. I owned it before we got married, and I was keeping it as a safe space for myself and the baby, meaning he was not welcome. As far as I know, he is staying at a hotel now. On Friday, my husband was served divorce papers at work. My best friend's husband had drafted them earlier, but I waited to make sure it was the right decision before going through with it. Since then, I have received several missed calls and voicemails with him crying and asking if I am really ending our family. He even sent me a selfie of himself crying in his car, which my best friend and I admittedly laughed at a little. My mother-in-law called me after hearing about the divorce papers and told me she thought I was making the right decision. She said she never wanted my marriage to end this way, or for her son to act so callously, but she assured me that she would always be there for me and the baby. She even tried to apologize on her son's behalf, but I told her it was not necessary. His actions were his own. This weekend, my best friend has been a lifesaver. She has stayed by my side, and we even went baby clothes shopping for a bit of happiness amidst all this chaos. Her husband has been an incredible support too, guiding me through the legal process. I am not sure what comes next, but I feel much calmer and confident that I am making the right decision.